As it's 6:30, can I suggest we begin? We'll welcome you to all to the leadership team. I don't believe there are any apologies for absence tonight, no. And are there any declarations of interest? The minutes of the previous meeting, they've been circulated. And are you happy that I sign them as a true and accurate record?
Just a small correction.
Yes.
On page 6. Page 6 of the big pack.
Point 6 or page 6?
Yes, on under VCS development, point 4 in the minutes. The third paragraph says the proposals would use 2.3 million over 3 years. It doesn't mention that 3-year period. The third paragraph on the second page.
Yeah, okay. We'll correct that, please.
Otherwise, it just doesn't read properly. There's no time frame.
Yeah, okay. So can you all these and then I'll sign them tomorrow? And could we now have 72 seconds silence, please, to remember those who've jotted down. I think that is particularly important that we remember those who died in Grenfell tragedies day, because we have two reports on the leadership team this evening. The Compliance to Social Housing and Annual Resilience Report, which really arise directly from that tragedy. But let us start where we are on the agenda, which is the 43 Climate Monitoring Report. And before I begin, I don't know if any eagle eyes have noticed this, but on the recommendations, the recommendations are out by 3, as it were. So it says savings section 25 should be 28, and 28 should be 31. So I've got copied here of these, how they relate to things in the paper. So it's just a clerical error, just to point it out. So Johnny, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Elizabeth. This Q3 position isn't much different in aggregate terms from Q2, and it's driven by a lot of the same pressures, so I think it can be fairly brief. Like all London boroughs and probably all councils nationally, we're having very significant problems with homelessness and with temporary accommodation, which are driving large overspends. That and Treasury returns, which we touched on, I think, at the last time of this meeting,
Yes.
The last time we had Q2, are the two principal drivers. But the paper has been steered through scrutiny committees. They've made recommendations, which I know that we're looking into and we're already responding to, and I'm grateful for the scrutiny they're giving us. And I think we need to continue to be very prudent, because the outlook has become gloomier over the past 12 months. There are some pockets of fantastic work around families and adults where we're more or less in balance, although there are, I'm sure, storm clouds always ahead in those sorts of areas. But nevertheless, yeah, I think a very difficult position, and we'll need to redouble our efforts on homelessness and TA in particular.
Yeah, I'd just like to pick up what you're saying about children and adults. I mean, all over the country, councils are almost going to the wall with the pressures on adult services and children's services. And I'd really like to commend our starting vote that they, you know, you've got £178,000. I'm going to spend an adult social care, which is absolutely incredible to do that over such a huge budget. And then I'm spending 9,000 in children's services despite increasing pressure. So I think that's really, it's incredible. Thank you. Let's hope it lasts till the next.
Yes.
So does that mean, Johnny, we're on track for a balanced budget?
No, it doesn't. This is the first year in several where we look as though we're likely to report an overspend. That's 2.778 million at the moment. That's great. That's less than the sum of the housing and social investment overspend, which means that the rest of the council is more or less in balance, which is the traditional position of the council. But so extreme are the pressures in housing and TA that we look as though we're likely to report an overspend overall. That could change. Last year we saw pretty significant changes between Q3 and Q4 in a favourable direction. I recall in the last financial year in Q1 we were overspent, but by the end of the financial year we were significantly underspent. So it's possible that things can move in a positive direction for us, but that's not where we are today, and we need to be very cautious.
How likely is that, Mike?
Well, I think that is often is the case, that the overspend falls during the year when you're more prudent at the beginning of the year. I suspect it won't be the case this year, and that we will end up with an overspend primarily because of those housing pressures. So I think that will be the.
But we have contingency.
But we have contingency to cover that, yeah.
Thank you.
Because it's housing, I mean, I can say a bit about it. I think I said it the last one because also it was flagged up there. It is a huge pressure all across the UK and particularly London as well. I mean, I understand there's a 150 million overspend on TA all across London, so we're not the only borough that's spending. And so at some point we're hoping that there will be some form of collective help, I suppose, of some way of tackling this issue. But I've spoken to our housing officers, and they're doing everything, and we're actually within the top 3 in London in our homelessness prevention. So we are doing everything we can, but there's still a lot that needs to be done, because otherwise the whole council
Problem lights.
yeah, and it impacts the whole council.
Okay, any other questions? John?
It's really on the council tax collection rate. We end the year in December of 85%. Do I make of that there's 15% short, or is that paid in January, February, and March that isn't shown on the graph? Right, that's page 69.
Normally our collection is around 19%.
That was my assumption with John Townsend.
I mean, it's compared to the previous year, so we are at the same rate, but we do continue to collect after the year. So the rates that are given are include collection beyond the year.
So why don't we display the other months of the year?
Well, this is for where we are
At the moment.
at the moment. So yeah,
I mean, I guess we can project what might happen in subsequent months, but the position isn't much different from any other.
Yeah, I mean, what that's showing really is pretty much the same as it was last year.
And we got
So,
97.
Yeah, so we'd expect to get to the same,
Which I think is
and then even beyond the financial year, we continue collecting some further amounts to get to the final collection.
Yeah, we should add that it's pretty high compared to most London boroughs, 97%, and actually it's been going up in recent years. It hasn't always been at 97, so I know there's a team there that does really good work, making sure that we get as close to 100% as possible.
There are no other questions for the leadership team. Mary, do you want to comment?
Yes, we had just a couple of recommendations, which were about presentation really, which were about showing the percentages that violence represent in the budget, and also showing percentage of budget savings not achieved to date as we're going along, just because both are quite good early warning indicators. And if they were shown, well, one isn't shown at all at the moment, and one is shown just as a number, not as a percentage. And we just thought those might be quite useful. And obviously, we clearly acknowledge there's a lot of underlying pressure on the budget, and share everybody's concern about it. And we did make the challenge that there's quite a lot of budget underachievement, and were we too optimistic at the beginning of the year? And if so, will we learn from that for the future? So those were basically the comments. I mean, there were a lot of detailed questions, which were wonderfully answered, obviously, as usual, by Johnny and Lisa. But those are the sort of main, more strategic.
Okay, so one is presentation of how we look at figures and.
Just to give us
how we look
those
at
early
savings, that's a very good
warnings,
idea, I think. And the other is, are we too optimistic? I don't think anyone saw this whole housing thing coming. If they had done, I suppose, in across London, then we wouldn't be in the same.
But we're already looking at all of those recommendations, and I've already seen a draft of some of the responses, and it's a good point. So I think we're on track to the 83% of the savings that we committed to. And Mary's right to push us on that, because there's a certain level of tolerance that's normal, and we need to make a judgment about where that level of tolerance should be. But if it's too high, then maybe we were over optimistic. So we need to review that once we get to the end of the year.
Thank you. If there aren't any other comments, could we agree the recommendations in paragraph 2 with the proviso that we will change all the section numbers within it? Great. Thank you. Next thing on the agenda is CLA, which is pretty straightforward. It's £40,000 a year to maintain our membership of Central London Forward. Those I previously been chair of Central London Forward, so of course I'm slightly biased. I choose other members to comment whether it's worthwhile. Josh.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And I think I succeeded you before Kim succeeded me on Central London Forward. And I just want to say for colleagues in the room, the £40,000 subscription fee, I think is extremely well worth. The coordination, especially around the employment that CLF does, it is really, really beneficial. I attended one of their events where they had a whole range of people with lots of forms of disabilities. So we had people who were blind, people with English, Russian as language, not necessarily actually definitely a disability, of course, but people who had come from overseas as refugees, etc., to get them into work through the programs that CLF ran. That is really, really beneficial. And some were our residents, some were residents from other Central London boroughs as well. And it provides that extra service that perhaps we can't just do locally here in RBKC as well. So for the price, I think it is a really excellent vision on the way forward.
I was just going to say, well, I succeeded you before you did it. And I was just sort of saying, actually, when I was on it during COVID with Graham, I mean, it was just incredibly helpful to be having all the other Central London boroughs and to hear what they were doing when we were in a sort of, unknown territory as to how we were going to support employment and businesses. So, 40,000 a year to have the wisdom of everyone else working together across party to influence government, I think is a really, really valuable thing to have. Yes, and I think we've had a lot in common with our other inner London areas. Yeah, and it's a very good lobbying organisation, and I think it's very well respected as a lobbying organisation because it's sort of based on evidence and data.
Well, I just feel compelled to say the last person in this segment.
Okay.
I think it's an excellent organisation, a great opportunity to use it for lobbying as well. So money well spent.
So can we all agree the recommendation in paragraph 3 that we have a new partnership agreement? 3 years, 40 grand a year. Yes?
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you. Right. Next item on the agenda is how we are going to comply with the requirements of the Social Housing Regulation Act. Of course, this is incredibly important to us. As the arrangements that we're looking at form part of our multi-year improvement programme for housing management, and it's not tacked on; it's integral to everything we do. Isn't that right?
Yes, yeah, it's part of a raft of legislation, but the fundamental one is the social housing regulation.
So I just want to say a little bit about it because it's slightly an irregular paper because there's not huge decisions. But I wanted to bring it to the leadership team. I wanted to make it very public that how important we take this and how we're very aware that a lot of this is from the results of Grenfell and how our officers are working really, really hard on this. I mean, it will be challenging in terms of it's quite a tight time frame, I understand, but I have every confidence that we are doing all that we can. As it says in the paper, we've got a new team within housing management to focus on this specifically. We're also taking the role of councillors very seriously, and we're having training next week on it. And this will also be followed up after Easter. And it basically the new act, it aims to kind of rebalance the relationship between the landlord and tenant. And so this is really, really important for all our tenants in our housing stock. I'm sure Doug will elaborate.
I need to say that so Social Housing Regulation Act is bringing back what it says, regulation and control over all landlords, which we welcome very, very much, and is a direct result of the tragedy that happened in it. It is coupled also with the Building Safety Act, which we had 34 high-risk buildings, which we have registered and the rest of it. And one of the things that you may not know is actually the Building Safety Regulator has already given us notice on the first of those. So it's all part of that inspection regime, which again has come directly from the tragedy at Grenfell. But there is other legislation in the offing in terms of our law, which is the small child at Darling lodged out in terms of how we deal with damp and mould. And there's also a bit in here about how we're dealing with that.
I think it's fair to say that implementing these changes completely aligns with our council plans and our ambition to become best council. This is really in our friendly.
Absolutely.
And then Emma.
So I was just really going to say, I mean, absolutely critical legislation. But on the reporting, Doug, is that an annual reporting? I mean, obviously the first reporting period is 24-25. Is that an annual? And have we seen people reporting to this yet?
So the reporting to, sorry, which element is that? Because there's lots of people we have to report to. Sorry.
Of para 4.33,
yeah,
talking about reporting.
Yeah, so we have a prescribed time by which we have to return our tenant satisfaction measures. Everyone has up until the 31st of March in which to carry out those surveys. Then after that, they return them, I think, I think it's a 3-month period or whatever. But we expect to see those results early autumn.
And that would be a good opportunity for us to also benchmark.
The regulators made it very clear they won't be putting it into a league table. But I'm sure that others will.
Right.
Thank you. And any other things with husband, one if you wanted to reference our visit yesterday, the importance of the relief family.
Yes, just to say that the bereaved family came to see us yesterday, and Doug and Maxine were able to reassure them that we were doing everything we can within housing management to increase our standards and to align with these regulations. And I think, as I said, I think it's very important to bear this in mind because this is really, really important for our legacy to Grenfell. Because we know in the past people weren't treated well by the TMO, and secondly, our safety standards weren't necessarily the best. And I know together we're looking for an award. It says from 1 to 4 or something. We think that our aim at the moment should be 2.
Just given the journey where we've been, that is where we would very much like to be. I mean, clearly we want to get to 1.
Of course we do. We want to become the best, but
at the moment,
not just to be the best.
I think that would be the aspiration.
Thank you, Emma. So, Doug, firstly,
I welcome this completely. I wonder if you could explain to, and I know you're it's the government, not you doing this, how this will actually work in practicality. Because it's all really good. I mean, I've been trying to help someone, one of our registered providers at the moment, and what she says to me is how powerless she feels. She's got water gap, underground, and all providers done nothing basically till I got involved, which is not how it should be. And I read this and I think that's all great. But how is it really going to be for these people? Because unless the Ombudsman's going to hire lots of people, presumably, to do all these extra, how are they really going to empower people like her when they're after you, or it might be us, and I'm not exonerating us at all, from making sure we should be doing what we should be doing already. I mean, do you know what I mean? I worry that it's all very well on paper. But where's the enforcement? Where are the people who
That's what
sorry,
do two things. One is how we're dealing with it, how confident you are that we can implement all of this.
Yeah.
And then there's other point, but equally if people are living in registered provider property, do we have any aegis over how they operate?
Yeah.
So the first one is clearly the first inspections will be starting very, very soon. I'm not actually aware of anyone that's received a notification of inspections, and they might, doesn't mean that they haven't. But we will get 6 weeks notice, and some people will be getting those not now. So clearly for our preparation, if we had a slightly longer period, we'd be in a lot better position. So I think that's fair to say. But we are working very hard to bring ourselves up to those standards. But remember, these standards were only actually physically published on the 29th of February this year. So it's not a huge amount of time. We didn't know what was likely to be in them though since last October. So that's for us. In terms of whether this does anything for us and being able to manage registered providers, it's no. But in terms of trying to explain what would happen, because part of this legislation means that the housing ombudsman and the regulator are able to share information. And that means that for your individual case, you can take that to the housing ombudsman. And if lots of people take that to the housing ombudsman from a particular landlord, then the housing ombudsman can refer that to the regulator who can then recommend inspection.
Thank you.
So that's where that connection is. And then the powers of the regulator are absolutely quite substantial, up to unlimited fines and stuff like that. So
that's very helpful.
So that's what is in control.
And on that note, the housing ombudsman was actually here.
Yes, last night, yes.
So last night, so we had a good meeting there.
So effectively, the role of the ombudsman also becomes more powerful because the ability to transfer that information to regulation.
Absolutely, and that, and I think we've seen a definite increase in the amount of cases to the housing ombudsman across the housing sector, substantially over the last 2 years to 18 months.
Yeah, that's really good.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions before I ask Mary?
Mary, anything from you?
Thank you. Well, I think I speak for all of us when I say, you're really welcome this. And we're really glad that the council is taking us very seriously. And as you say, we haven't had much time to respond. But I'm sure that we will implement it and get our standards up. Thank you. So, lovely. Can we accept the recommendations in paragraph 2, please? Thank you. Next page is the annual resilience report. So this gives us a high-level overview of council's continuing work to really bolster its resilience, preparedness, and what we did in 2023. You'll see that there's a summary of our self-assessment process against the standards for London. So we looked at the standards, we looked at ourselves, and it's an honest appraisal of where we're at. And it's also full thing is also attached as appendix 2. So what this report is really saying is that we review and support the current positions and the next steps. So you'll see in it the huge amount of progress that we've made in 2023, that all posts on the resilience team are filled, or as of February, that there's delivered Pan London community resilience training, that you did a community resilience workshop, that you visited quite a lot of all of our community faith groups and centres where we would keep using an emergency. So the real thing is that Finnegan really has contacts now, the phone numbers and the relationships. So we did have a problem. I think that's what's really important. We also did an evacuation plan for Lancaster West, community resilience there. We took part in Exercise Safe Cities, and so we've really upped our game again last year, and we have more capacity because we now have 233 trained officers. What I would say is quite interesting because on a Thursday, Finnegan showed me their strategy. We were talking through it and what, where our weaknesses still lay, etc. And then the next morning at 2 a.m, we had a fire in the Royal Borough and 160 people who were evacuated, and how we looked after them. So I think that's the next stage, isn't it? To look at this and then have a wash up of how we performed on the night, because I'm sure we'll find other things that we need to learn. But overall, I would say that our strategy and the work we've done stood us in very good stead for that emergency, and some proof of the pudding was immediately in the evening. So I don't know if there are any questions. One other thing I'd like to highlight was the business continuity. We've got a new Risk Connect continuity software, and although that's still flashing amber in your performance report as our self-assessment, I guess that also is a huge improvement. But maybe you could comment on because most of everything is green now. I'd like you to comment on 3 things which are amber, not bright green, and also how you felt we did, in the biggest emergency that we've had since 2017. How did we come up?
So business continuity is amber. We moved to from the old system Clearview to a new system. We've got 94 plans to update and sign off, and so we're heading in the right direction. Should be there a reasonable time. The second one is community resilience, and quite a bit of work done over the last 2 years, especially this year. Amber at the moment, but we're hoping to get to green soon. We've done lots more community engagement, faith engagement, rest centre engagement. We have about 30 rest centres.
Yeah.
We visited them last year and this year.
Yeah, so you visit them all.
Yes,
you know who they are, and you know the people in charge.
And safety assessments, make sure they're suitable, things like that. So that's the second one. And then the third one is recovery. And we are developing a recovery strategy and plan. And that's the reason why we're not green on that one, we're amber. So again, we're work in progress. We are working hard, developing strategies, plans. But that's the reason.
And when will all these extra strategies and plans be in place so that we can say it's all green?
I think the recovery plan has been produced. So it should be coming to EMT, CPAG, which is our governance structure, EMT, and then and it's based on Pan London structure as well. So we do everything in line with Pan London and national practice practice.
And your reflections on the fire and our resilience on that?
Yeah. First few hours of any kind of emergency response is always quite challenging, especially at 2 in the morning.
Yes.
You see yourself, you were up. You wanted to call, but you were up. Rob and I and others as well. But we quickly made up for that, and we had staff there hours later, and on-time members for your support.
I like
so, especially deputy leader, you're a star, actually. So and you continue to be. So we rely on you. So thank you. But Rob has instigated a quite detailed debriefing process.
Great.
I mean, I had hundreds or so bullet points in my OneNote system that I was constantly updating, as you were as well. So once that's let's follow the process.
Yes.
Let's get that report out and then we'll go through Maxine and others and then we'll brief you. on it.
And thank you. I think all the members here want to know is that there is a sort of proper debrief process and we're open to learning and, terrifying that it wasn't an exercise, but nevertheless, it'll be stuff that we can continue to improve on. Because again, given our history, to be the best council in resilience would really be something we'd like to achieve.
We want one example of something we started without in advance of the debrief is water. We've just bought lots and lots of water bottles. We've put them in our storerooms and we've got water now, so we can get them out in case the hotel or any centre doesn't have them. So there are things we have started straight away in advance of that.
And charges.
We've got that as well. I see a big box of them in the back, so I'm just really some as well.
Any comments or questions on this before I ask Mary? No? Mary?
Nothing from me, no.
Nothing from you. Well, thank you very much. It really feels so much more solid than it did in the past. And as you say, you're self-assessing against London. And I think you have a pretty good idea where we are. This is a very real report and really grounded in the truth. Thank you. Can we read the recommendations, please, paragraph? Thank you. Oracle. Yeah, welcome.
Wow. Big team. So thank you. This is a very complex project, but a very important one for us. ERP affects the whole organisation, all of us in this room and all of the paid service. So it's really important we get it right. I think we knew going in that there would be pretty substantial risks associated with the timelines and the budgets that have been very far. Some of those risks have materialised, and the purpose of this paper is to assess out what some of those risks are, what is now needed to be done to ensure that we all have confidence in the rollout once that happens, and the mitigations that we can put in place to ensure that this is the last time, hopefully, that we come here to discuss the programme and to agree variations. I want to thank Mike and David and the whole team that's been working on it, because I know that it's been a difficult process, but we've all been briefed, and I think OSC has been possibly as well, which is good. But I think it's likely that there'll be questions on this from colleagues, and I look forward to hearing them.
That's because you do read things in the papers, like it's Surrey County Council recently, some of the issues when they switch systems and
Yes.
Okay, well, I have a question, and it might not be a very clever question. So if you look at page 4, so paragraph 2.8 says, sorry, 2.6 says, to extend the current arrangement will cost 1.2 million. And then additional internal resourcing is 1.5 million. And 211 says to agree the additional cost of 1.9 million. But if I add 1.2 to 1.5, I make 2.7 million additional costs, not 1.9. Perhaps I'm missing something.
No, so there are, I think in the table further in the report, the way Lisa sets out, there are some areas where we haven't need to let contract the value we anticipated in the original budgets. There's some areas of the budget that weren't fully utilised. We've also reduced contingency. So overall, the impact in paragraph 2.11 is the overall increase in budget that's required to deliver the programme. There are some swings and there are some swings around us and some of the contractual arrangements that were less than we expected when we set the budget up originally.
So the total cost would be 1.92.
That's correct.
Thank you.
And I think it's fair enough to reduce contingency, because this is in essence the contingency
For this.
or some or a lot of the contingency. There's still some left, but one of the reasons for the increased cost, there's some gaps that were in the original business case. Those have now been identified, and so some of those can be funded from the contingency. I mean, obviously there is the additional cost is more than the contingency was, unfortunately, but but it is reasonable, I think, to reduce the contingency as part of this process.
Just a quick question, just clarifying on that 8.9, because there's you've taken all of the contingency out in the business case. But where we reading the table, forecast cost.
No, it says 900 to 600, you took 300 out.
That's it. I'm just putting it to the table.
What page is that?
Summary of the total projected cost on page 195. Shows a forecast cost of 14.9 million with no contingency. I think that's it.
Yes, I think that's correct, and we're saying that that's the aim, but there is the possibility that we would need more contingency, which is in paragraph 8.10. So this is a projection of the new cost if we don't use any more contingency in 8.9. So we have taken the contingency out in that paragraph.
Okay, so there's 2.54 if you were to have the additional contingency of 600. Got it. Okay.
I think the important paragraph is on page 189. Your option 3 is 59 and which says that, we're the first partner who's been awarded, so there are more problems than we had anticipated. And having a 6-month range of extension should mean that we get over all of the hurdles and that it's sensible to actually just do it now and extend the contracts and build in additional capacity here and then go live in April. That's your advice, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, I think we've set out the reasons why we've had to unfortunately make the decision to ask for this, and I'm sorry that we've had to do that, but I think it will lead to success in implementation, which is obviously crucial. Yeah. And there is, it is palpable now with the team. I think the confidence that we're able to move forward where with that longer period, because the relationships with Hampshire are much better. We're working very closely. We're getting data transferred, which we weren't originally. So we are, I think, getting into a much stronger position than we were in.
And this time frame allows for testing, right? So
it does.
Test the system before you go live in April.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got 5 cycles of data migration.
Yeah.
So the first cycle is actually the quality of data is better than we in Hampshire expected, which is positive. We've got various stages of testing with users throughout the coming months, which will make sure when we go live with the system, we are confident it will work. It'll work well.
And we have a design baseline here at the design gateway, and both finance and HR have signed up the design. Okay. So the design and build now is stable, and as you say, we're moving into that testing phase with the data migration, feeding those cycles so we can validate the solution.
So it's much more solid now.
More solid, yeah.
You're solid. Good. We'll hold you to that. Are there any other questions for Mary from OSC?
From OSC, we had a briefing. We didn't look at it formally in a meeting because the cycles were out, but we had a briefing which was very helpful. I think there was real concern, particularly as Brighton cite Oracle as one of the causes of their misery and difficulties, adoption of Oracle. So there was a real concern. I have to say, when we had a briefing, I hadn't realised that actually the increase in costs is nearer to sort of 40%. Than the original. I thought the increase in the budget is 13%, but actually the increase on the cost of the contracts we'd originally let is actually even more significant than that. And we're 1 year out from our new date, so it clearly is very concerning. And we wondered about whether we'd been let down by some of our professional advisors along the way, and what action we would be taking about that. And I suppose in the end, of all of these things, what matters is that we learn from them. So is there going to be a thorough after action review after this, including looking at the role of our professional advisors? And, you know, one hopes that things like our new procurement function will prevent us from having problems around exit strategies and so on from contracts, which clearly plays a part here. So I think, you know, we were very, very concerned about it, and although very much reassured by the things that Lisa and David had to say about the new measures that are put in place and the new grip, we felt it was very important that we look at it afterwards, fully examine that all the roles of particularly our professional advisors.
I think that's very well said, and I think it reflects the conversation the leadership team have had about the work of professional advisors. Expensive professional advisors. But being where we are, I think this is a very sensible way of going.
Yes, we completely agreed with the recommendation.
That case, with the prize bill, we need to look at the advice of those who we pay huge amounts of money for. Are there any other comments? Because this is one of our really biggest projects. Maxine, you satisfied that we're sort of heading in the right direction now?
I am. I think the team have taken preemptive action to sort of, you know, this would be much worse if we were staring at this in September and we were having to make these changes. So the data migration, having done projects of this sort, it's not an ERP, but the big data migration projects before, the fact that we have had an early data link that has worked out well, and in fact better than we expected, is really positive, because when you hear some of the stories from others around the country, then often it is some aspects of the kind of data loading and migration that has let the project down. So that is positive. And the last thing I would just say is that whilst Oracle has been cited in at least 2 or 3 financial difficulty stories recently, there are also close to home examples of implementation going very well. And in fact, a really large percentage of local authorities use Oracle as their SAP system. So I don't think that we should be unnerved by that.
Thank you. On the basis that we all have to accept the recommendations in paragraph 2. Yes, we agree. Thank you. Final paper this evening. Sorry, I'm rushing ahead of myself. The Second Homes Council Tax Premium. So, Charlie, you want to introduce this?
Sure. I think the key thing to stress here is that this is merely an opt-in. We're early in the financial cycle, which means that we don't know what might arise in terms of financial headwinds, settlements, census figures, possible change in the government. And nor do we have the guidance associated with the Second Homes Premium, which means that we don't know how much of the sum we would retain. That means there are important questions unanswered on both of those fronts, which mean that it would be reckless to give a firm indication in either direction at this stage. But I think it's prudent on the basis of those unknowns for us to retain the flexibility to apply a premium should we later in the cycle have the assurance on those 2 points or those 2 buckets of issues. And we make a collective judgment that that's the right way to go. But for tonight, we are merely voting on an option that gives us flexibility, and I think that is a prudent approach.
I would agree. I think it's very sensible. There are too many unknowns at the moment. Are there any comments? I think Johnny summed it up very well. We're just going for having an option to see what we would like to do in future once the guidance becomes clear, once we know how much money we're going to keep from it, and whether the government would make an adjustment or not to other. Okay, Mary, any comments?
I've got no comments on this or the next page.
Right. Can we agree the recommendations then, please, in paragraph? Agree. Thank you. Agenda item 10. This is the household support fund.
Yes. in the Dampier news about flexibilities and grants given by a Conservative government. This is a relief to us because it means that there are programmes that we have been funding that we can continue to fund for an additional 6 months. That will obviously be welcome to all the people that have taken up these opportunities, these grants. There's still a question about what will come next, but that's not a question that we have to resolve tonight. I think tonight we're focusing on the fact that there are a number of programs that we've facilitated or introduced over the past couple of years that we think are doing good across the borough for lots of people who have been very badly affected by the rising cost of living and the rising bills that are out there. And this paper will mean that we can save off some of the worst financial risks posed to households for at least 6 months more. So I would very much encourage colleagues to vote for it. And as we can see here, there are lots of good things that are happening because of this money.
Yes, and I suppose in another 6 months, if inflation continues to come down, it's maybe in a slightly better position.
Definitely. Yeah. No, it's important although the figures today were good, or at least in the right direction, it's certainly possible that inflation could fall over the next 6 months. On the one hand, that could mean that some of the pressures are less acute. On the other, it could make the council's overall finances more stable and mean that we have a greater degree of flexibility about things that we wish to introduce or to maintain. So I think it's the right thing to take up this funding and then to review what's working. I think also in the light of evolving need, because the need that's out there today won't be the same as the need that's out there in 6 months' time.
Exactly.
And actually, in a certain respect, it's quite helpful to have that moment in time 6 months from now to conduct that review.
Catherine?
I would start to say that it's really good news that we're able to extend the vouchers during the holidays to another 4,600 children who will be able to get a voucher for £20 a week up until the end of August. So that's fantastic news for our school, for those children during the holidays. And as Johnny said, we'll have to see where we are then in that position and what's coming up next as to what we can do after that. But at least they know that they've got summer holidays, they'll be getting the voucher, and that must be really reassuring to a lot of our families and children.
Any other comments? No. So at least we're ending on a good news story.
Yes.
Yes. So that's great. And can we all agree the recommendations in paragraph?
Agree.
Thank you. Is there any opposition? Thank you very much. I declare the meeting closed. Thank you.